Something I don't see talked about often enough as a sign of maturity is a respect for other people's time. If, for example, you go into a team meeting and someone explains a concept and then you respond, "Wait, could you say all that again? I wasn't listening." That's a waste of the time of the person who is trying to explain something to you. It's frustrating for them to have to repeat themselves when the expectation was that you were listening the first time. Now, every now and then if your attention span slips, it's understandable. Team meetings can still go pretty long even if you are respecting each other's time, and it's not the easiest thing to maintain focus like that, especially when you're younger and have less practice. It's still better to have them repeat it than to just let them assume you were listening when really you weren't. Maybe you have some sort of disability that makes it harder to focus, in which case you need to communicate to your team that information should be shared in different ways to accommodate for you. But the older you get, the more you try to take proactive steps to make sure you're giving people your attention when it's expected, so that you minimize situations like this, or that you manage those expectations if they're unrealistic, instead of continuing to agree to the same expectations and repeatedly not meeting them. If you're practicing with your team, and this is time in which the expectation is that the team is trying to learn and improve, playing weapons you wouldn't normally play is a waste of your teammates' time and often your opponents as well. Nobody's learning what they need to learn to succeed in a tournament setting if you're not playing the way that you would if you were trying to win. Your team has a limited amount of time to play together. So if the expectation is that you spend that time improving, don't make it so that 7 other players are getting less useful information about what they should be doing to improve for the whole time they're playing with you. That is a waste of their time. It's especially bad in the case of a tryout. A tryout's a very short amount of time during which you're trying to decide whether you want to play with someone in a tournament setting, and they're trying to figure out the same about you. And yet I've seen people on teams holding tryout scrims pick meme weapons during the tryouts. It's one thing if you're just trying to vibe and see if you enjoy each other's company socially, but if it's a scrim, a chance to show off how the person is playing, I would immediately leave the tryout after just that one match, because I would be able to tell my time was not going to be respected on that team. In scrims, if you set an expectation that you're going to be able to scrim another team at a certain time, if they arrive at that scrim and your team isn't there, or you're missing your fourth and you aren't ready, that's also a waste of that other team's time. If they'd known you weren't going to be available, they could have made other plans. And maybe that fourth did finally show up 20 minutes later, but that's 3 or 4 games of Splatoon the other team could have been playing with a team that would show up. And if they couldn't trust you to show up when you said you'd show up the first time, what faith should they put in your team to have it together in 20 minutes? For all they know, your teammate is asleep, on a date, kidnapped, reuniting with a lost loved one who just contacted them after going missing in the Bermuda Triangle 12 years ago. There's been no establishment of trust on your part that they'll ever get into that scrim. So why should they spend more time waiting for you? Just respect their time, and as soon as you realize there's a problem, let them know that you're not going to be ready yet, that you're looking for a sub, but that if they find something else in the meantime, that it's a better bet for them. If you're playing Sendu Queue, don't ready up until you are prepared to spend a certain amount of time grouping up, and then spend the time it takes to play a best of 7 set of Splatoon. If you know you're going to need to leave in a half hour, you do not have time. You should not ready up, because by readying up, you're setting an expectation that you're going to be available to play for longer than that amount of time. If you ready up, but then you're not going to be checking the website, you're going to end up wasting the time of your teammates and opponents, 7 different players, because you set an expectation you'd be there and didn't follow through. Even if you manage to be able to play the match, but you make them wait, say, 10 to 15 minutes before you can start, why not just ready up after those 10 to 15 minutes, at the time where you're actually ready to go? You're setting an expectation that you're going to be ready to play when the teams match up, and if you don't meet that, again, you're wasting time. Those 10, 15 minutes that you're allowed, that's maybe 2 games of Splatoon, 3 games of Splatoon that could have been played in that time, and people are not getting as much practice because of you. Other people are happy to play the video game with you, but you have to remember that getting other people involved means that you'll have to set a common expectation to show up and hold up your end of that agreement. If you're too often dropping the ball on your end of that agreement, if you're making it inconsistent whether they get to play with you, you're starting to make it worth more for them to just play with someone else who will meet the expectations that they agree to.